Support for WUWM podcast comes from Life Navigators, your disability partner, offering disability services for over 75 years. More on their family resources at lifenavigators.org or their helpline, 414-774-6255.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today, we'll explore how online extremism is showing up in the real world.
We do see a direct correlation between political rhetoric and kind of these spikes in direct kind of hate crimes towards members of the Muslim American community.
Then we'll continue our Milwaukee Socialist series with a look at the city's first socialist mayor. Plus, we'll get some takeaways from the historic Artemis II mission around the moon.
A whole nother generation of people, maybe two, thought, whoa, okay, this is happening on my watch. Because for them, this is the stuff of lore, the stuff of almost science fiction. So it's nice to make it real again.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. Last week, there was a shooting at a mosque in San Diego. 3 people were killed while trying to prevent the shooters from entering the Islamic Center. The 2 teen suspects met online and shared white supremacist views. Their writings included hateful rhetoric toward various religions and races, and both the political left and right. Dr. Anissa Bagasra is an associate professor of psychology at Kennesaw State University. She joins WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez to explore how the shooter's motives are connected to a rise in Islamophobia in online spaces.
As someone who's been studying Islamophobia, I would imagine the shooting at the San Diego Islamic Center, which is incredibly tragic, but maybe for you isn't surprising.
No, it wasn't surprising at all. You know, we've been kind of tooting the horn of warning for a number of years that, like, this is going to be the outcome of this buildup of Islamophobic rhetoric. So the article that you saw actually in the Conversation US, the original article was published in April, but a lot of my research focuses not only on Islamophobia and how it impacts Muslim Americans' mental health, but how it impacts their help seeking for both physical health and mental health, and how, you know, this kind of rhetoric leads to hate crimes and prejudice within our communities.
So what does this mean for new arrivals, people that are trying to make a place in a whole new country?
Yes.
How much more difficult is it for people than, like, as you were saying, trying to seek help in social services that are just getting newly acclimated to a place?
Well, first of all, when you're coming to a new country, you don't know the system. You don't know anything about how the system works. So a lot of what you're learning the first year or 2 years is just, what is the system in this country? Because we have different laws, social norms than many other countries do. And so if you have family members or friends or a support system already here to help you navigate that, it's a lot easier and a lot faster. And if you don't have that, then you're going to experience a lot of what we call acculturative stress, stress and strain that is related to that particular process. So I teach ethnic minority psychology at Kennesaw State University. And a lot of what I cover is that acculturation process, and acculturative stress and its impact on individuals, and the refugee and immigrant experience is a huge part of that course. Right now, our refugee program is primarily on hold in the United States. But, you know, in the past, typically, like, people come. So a refugee is not somebody who's, necessarily voluntarily planning to immigrate to the United States. They have become displaced from their home country because of war, because of violence, because of, civil strife, whatever the conditions are. And then if you're sponsored through a refugee agency, you may not have family, friends, loved ones, or other people from your ethnic, cultural, religious, language background to lean on, to kind of learn and navigate those systems. So we see a huge amount of acculturative stress. And then for refugees, they're expected to find work and pay back those flights and become economically independent fairly quickly, which can be really, really difficult to do if you don't know the language and you kind of don't know the system, if you don't have the educational background or the skills necessary in the area that you're resettled into, and you don't have a choice on where you're being resettled in the United States.
Right. And in the piece that you wrote, and kind of as you kind of talked about, there's also studies that I think you have done and then also point to that show the impact that this has on someone's health, both mental and physical, as far as like accessing social services and the depression that can set in, which we've heard of too.
Yeah. So imagine you're a refugee, for example, an immigrant or a refugee, but particularly if you're a refugee, you're being resettled in the United States. So we've seen waves of refugee resettlement, the Syrian war, Afghan war, prior to that, the war in Bosnia, in that area. So the first Gulf War. So we've had multiple waves of refugees from predominantly Muslim countries that we see. And so imagine you're dealing with all of these other challenges of navigating and becoming economically self-sufficient. And on top of that, you're being told, go back to where you came from. You're not welcome here. So imagine the mental health implications, high rates of depression, high rates of anxiety, and low rates of help seeking, even for normal medical conditions, particularly if you're uninsured or underinsured. But in one of the studies that's been conducted, they did a study related to the so-called Muslim ban during Trump's first term in office, and they found a significant rate of particularly people from those countries that were involved with the Muslim ban, particularly immigrants from those countries, that they actually significant drop in using medical services, including maternal, and prenatal medical services. So a huge impact of the Muslim ban on usage of services related to maternal and child health, which has just huge implications for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you kind of show this, then you have this spike in emergency visits where people aren't getting proactive care and then they're in this reactive situation. And, if we're tying this all back into how words have consequences, we saw this in San Diego, right? Like, first of all, to the 3 men who were killed and sacrificed themselves to save the lives of the 140 children in the mosque, which NPR has reported.
On Tuesday, Imam Taha Hassan, who leads the center, paid tribute to them. There was Mansour Kaziha, who'd been there since they broke ground on the site 40 years ago.
He was the handyman. He was the cook.
But also, if we're talking about the shooters, some things are coming out. We know that they met online in what was described as a global white supremacist accelerationist movement, which is basically they have this wide hatred of everyone. Like it's not siloed to a particular gender identity.
It's Islamophobia. It's homophobia.
Women, exactly.
It's anti-Semitism. It's all of the things that are seen as a threat to white supremacy, seen as a threat of this idea of replacement. And the reality is that by the year 2050, the United States will be a majority minority country. So individuals that are identified as an ethnic minority group will actually population-wise be in the majority. There will be a majority of non-whites and particularly mixed race individuals who identify as mixed race. And so this is being used to perpetuate this fear of some sort of takeover, or when population dynamics shift, perhaps individuals will be treated the way that they have treated minorities for many years.
Right.
Unfortunately.
And that conversation is happening online. And you've written a lot about this, and you've looked into this, that these spaces right now and since 2016, since the rise of Trump, the first presidency, have just been so ripe for hate, and maybe even going back to 9/11.
Yeah.
But what is happening online? Because we didn't just get here overnight.
No, this is a very, very long buildup. So we have a couple of different arms of things that are happening. We have the overall media portrayal and framing of Muslims and Islam since really prior to 9/11, but like majorly since 9/11. So in terms of news coverage, if a news story focuses on Islam or Muslims, 2/3 of stories will be negative. So overwhelmingly negative portrayals of Islam and Muslims if they're covered in the media. So like stories that focus on real people and their lives, or positive types of stories, don't make it into the media about Muslims and Islam very, very rarely. So we have that particular problem. Then on social media, we have this rise of misinformation, disinformation, the fact that like Facebook and other social media platforms have reduced their community standards, which is not just affecting Muslims, it's affecting other groups as well, and particularly LGBTQ and trans individuals. So there's a lack of policing of what hate speech is. So basically, hate speech is allowed on social media platforms now.
Which you've documented already
yes.
wasn't great. It already was a problem online in those places.
Yeah, they already weren't doing a really good job of policing. That's what we found in our study that was actually funded by Meta, by their content policy grant in 2019. So we were looking at Islamophobic rhetoric on Facebook and other social media platforms. And we found that people are able to hide it through memes. And we were just studying public news media pages. So the Facebook pages of major news media outlets, as well as Donald Trump's Facebook page. So we had kind of like conservative media pages, kind of more neutral, all across the board. And we found consistent themes either in the posts that mention Islam and Muslims or the comments that followed from ordinary people. This us versus them, that Islam is not a real religion, that it's a cult. We see a lot of these themes, that Islam is incompatible with Western values. Facebook didn't take any of those down. We're looking at this in 2019 and 2020, and we're scrubbing data going back to 2017. So we're talking about really dehumanizing hate speech that is there to see for years and is not being, viewed as violating their community standards at the time, the community standards that they had that they've now gotten rid of.
Right. And it also feels like there's been a lack of leadership electeds saying much about this kind of hate speech. So what happened in 2017, 2016 to 2019 has all been normalized to a point where you have Congress people tweeting out just really, really horrific things. And
really horrible things.
Really horrible things. And I'm even thinking about, the shooters' writings, like you had brought up Sharia law kind of taking over towns in Texas and not be, Islam not being compatible with the West. Yeah. Last week there were hearings in Congress called Sharia-free America, and there's, the travel bans that are like, we're back, as well as this ongoing conflict with Iran, which all feels connected. So
it is.
What have you learned about the causes of the spikes in Islamophobia in moments like this?
Yeah, so we do see a direct correlation between political rhetoric and kind of these spikes in direct kind of hate crimes towards members of the Muslim American community. So what Muslims are really concerned about is right now, with it being election season and so many people are running for various state, local government positions, a lot of them have turned to playing into those kind of Islamophobic tropes about Sharia law and invasion and taking over, and they're using it for their political campaigns to drum up votes. And we're seeing complete silence from both sides of the political spectrum about this kind of hateful speech and language that's being used. And then we're seeing it directly translate into people taking action based on what they're hearing from their local political leaders. And then we see this really horrible, horrific, tragic incident that's emerged from that. That's a direct relation between harmful online rhetoric and political rhetoric and how that translates into prejudice and hate speech, and then eventually into hate crimes. And that can include harassment, bullying, discrimination on the job, and then also things like these shootings that we've seen.
Dr. Anissa Bagasra is an associate professor of psychology at Kennesaw State University. She spoke with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. Milwaukee is known for its deep ties to socialism. It was the first major city to elect a socialist mayor and was the first place to elect a socialist to Congress. But their rise to power was rocky, and their status as a third party often made progress an uphill battle. Last week, we kicked off our 4-part series on the Milwaukee Socialists. We're exploring the accomplishments of the city's 3 socialist mayors, where we see their legacy today, and how the party has evolved. Today, we'll explore what happened after the monumental election of 1910, which propelled the city's first socialist mayor into office. In 1910, the Milwaukee Socialists won a clean sweep. They were in charge of the mayor's office, the Common Council, and the Milwaukee County Board. Working-class people and labor unions that had been galvanized by the conditions of the late 1800s had helped propel the Socialists into office. Publisher Victor Berger became the first socialist elected to the U.S. Congress. It was a huge success for the party, and especially for Victor Berger, who had championed what he called the Milwaukee idea, as historian John Gerda explains.
A hand-in-glove alliance between the working people's unions and the party itself. This is a time when they were pretty much shut out of the corridors of power. And unions certainly had risen. They were in the ascendancy back then.
After the election, Socialists controlled 21 of the 35 seats in the Common Council and 10 of the 16 county supervisor positions. And of course, there was Milwaukee's new mayor, the first socialist mayor of a major U.S. city, Emil Seidel. Here's history teacher John Deisinger.
Emil Seidel, who clearly comes from the working class, he's a pattern maker, in industrial plants. In a lot of ways, his message is one of cleaning up the city and ending corruption. This was like the big thing the socialists ran on. The sort of graft, the filth, the wheeling and dealing of the Rose administration and other administrations. He sort of said, we, the socialists, are going to get into office and we're going to run this city cleanly, fairly, and we're not going to take graft.
Seidel had run and won on the idea of cleaning up city government and the city itself, especially the waterways, which were contaminated with sewage. This pragmatism would later lead to the Milwaukee Socialists' nickname, the Sewer Socialists. But Seidel had much larger goals. John Gerda shares one of his favorite quotes from Seidel.
Some Eastern smarties called ours a sewer socialism. Yes, we wanted sewers in the workers' homes, but we wanted much, oh so very much more than sewers. We wanted our workers to have pure air, sunshine, planned homes, living wages, recreation for young and old, vocational education. We wanted a chance for every human being to be strong and live a life of happiness. And we wanted everything that was necessary to give them that. Playgrounds, parks, lakes, beaches, clean creeks and rivers, swimming and wading pools, social centers, reading rooms, clean fun, music, dance, song, and joy for all. That was our Milwaukee Social Democratic movement. So, I love that. It's kind of very, very non-policy oriented. We wanted people to be happy. We wanted the government to be the agent of their happiness.
But he wouldn't have much time to do it. The term for mayor was just 2 years at the time, and most of the Social Democrats had won by very slim margins. Seidel had won his seat with just 46% of the vote. Here's historian Ames McGinnis.
Seidel and Berger and others understood that the corruption of the other parties had given them an opening, but that opening would close up or disappear if they didn't deliver on their promise to clean up government.
As soon as they were elected, they got to work. One of the first things on the docket, fixing the budget. Under previous administrations, politicians had engaged in widespread misuse of city funds. Theft from the city was commonplace. Everything from oats for horses or coal for homes to equipment from job sites.
They did things that in retrospect may seem kind of basic, but at the time were revolutionary and seem almost poignant. They did things like come up with inventories of city property. When you count the number of shovels you have, it makes it harder for people to walk off with your shovels.
Under the Seidel administration, the city completed its first inventory of city property. The Socialists were very concerned with how Milwaukee's government had been spending taxpayers' money. Today, that fact may sound surprising because of how socialist policies are often portrayed, as historian John Gerda explains.
I think there's this lingering myth that socialists are these sort of tax and spend radicals. They were as frugal as any Milwaukee housewife, any Milwaukee hausfrau, and certainly that was in Seidel's administration when that began. He claimed that he saved Milwaukee something like $500 in printing costs by taking the names of dead people off the voting ballots. So he was very much hands-on, and began that tradition of efficient and public-looking government.
The Socialists not only wanted to create a more efficient budget process, but a transparent one, so citizens could see how funds were being spent. And they wanted to do it with experts. Here's Ames McGinnis.
Milwaukee Socialists believed in expertise, and they believed on going to the leading national and international experts. What did research, what did the latest findings of science and social science have to teach us about creating a more just society and a less wasteful government? They bring in accountants from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and Socialists in Milwaukee introduced cutting-edge accounting techniques that really make Milwaukee a leader in municipal governance in the early 20th century.
Mayor Seidel created a new office dedicated to the task of cleaning up the city's budget, as John Gerda explains.
He had something called the Bureau of Economy and Efficiency that was run by a Madison prof, John Commons, who came in on a salary of $6,000 a year and pretty much put Milwaukee on a scientific basis. And that was really turning things around from one-page budgets under the Rose years in earlier periods to very detailed line item budgeting. So turning Milwaukee around from something that had been very informally run to something that was quite efficient.
In 1911, they presented their budget in a first-of-its-kind exhibition open to the community. The event was publicized in the Milwaukee Leader, a socialist newspaper established by Victor Berger in that same year. The Leader became an essential part of the Socialists' messaging campaign, alongside the Bundle Brigade, a group that distributed literature and leaflets for the Socialists. They could reportedly paper the entire city in just a couple of days.
The Socialists, whenever they were at moments of strength, they really relied on a socialist press, socialist newspapers to reach working class and other readers.
This was a part of the transparency the Social Democrats had promised to the people of Milwaukee. But they had also made another major promise: to clean up the city streets, and most importantly, the water. History teacher John Deisinger explains what the city looked like at the time.
If you think about Milwaukee in the early 20th century, a city of many hundreds of thousands of people, where the primary mode of locomotion is horses. Perhaps not pleasant to think about, but if you think about how many millions of tons of manure that is, the city stank. It was disgusting. There was precious little green space where people could sort of escape from that stink. The river was a fetid, hideous sewer. And so a big part of what Seidel does is says we need to make this city a clean, decent place to live in. So he's putting into place much more scientific and organized street clearance. This is also where you start to see a really serious approach towards solving Milwaukee's wastewater problem.
Cleaning the city's water was a monumental task, and not something Seidel would be able to complete during his short time in office. But the stakes were too high to do nothing.
Socialists were often going on about what a shame it was, how many babies in Milwaukee were dying of typhoid fever, for example. How many people were dying of these illnesses spread in part by contaminated water and contaminated air. And they were saying, we need to do something about that. It is the job of the city to do something about this. This is a matter of the public welfare, and so it should be of public concern.
The Social Democrats once again turned to experts for help, as McGinnis explains.
They tap leading public health experts and leading experts in designing water-related, sewage-related infrastructure. They promised to make things better for people. They did research and found new methods and strategies to deliver on those promises. And then they created systems of accountability to make sure that citizens could see for themselves that socialists were improving their lives. It was a remarkably effective approach to working class politics that benefited us all.
But the Social Democrats' trifecta of power would come to an abrupt end with the election of 1912 and the collaboration of unlikely allies.
The Democrats and Republicans found more in common with each other in opposing socialists than they did in opposition ideologically. So they had a fusion candidate, Gerhard Bading, who was a health commissioner. So I guess you call that ideological bankruptcy. They saw more interest in putting themselves together to oust Seidel.
The Socialists lost the mayor's office, but they were still powerful. Daniel Hone continued on as city attorney for another 4 years after Seidel left office. Victor Berger remained in Congress, and the Socialists still had many seats on the Common Council and County Board. More than that, they had created a larger culture that was sustaining the movement. Here's Ames McGinnis.
It's this world of taverns, of musical societies, of literary societies, parades, parties, picnics, union halls, and it just creates this a kind of culture that sustains people as individuals, as families, as members of unions, and also enables this kind of transmission of ideas, and then creates this formidable platform for mobilization.
And their biggest triumphs were still on the horizon. Join us next week to learn about the many accomplishments of Mayor Daniel Hone, the namesake of the Sewer Socialists, and the creation of Milwaukee's beloved park system. You just heard the second part of our 4-part series on the Milwaukee Socialists. At WUWM.com, you can find the first part and see examples of early socialist publications and posters. In about 15 minutes, we'll look back on NASA's Artemis II mission and what it means for the future of space travel. But first, we'll learn how collaboration has led to 10 years of successful Heal the Hood events in Milwaukee. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. For more than a decade, Heal the Hood Block Party and Resource Fair has brought the Milwaukee community together for entertainment and mutual aid services. Heal the Hood MKE was created to address the need for safer, healthier, and more connected neighborhoods in Milwaukee. Ahead of this year's event, WUWM race and ethnicity reporter Taryn Powell speaks with the event's founder, Ajamu Butler, and an event partner, Ricardo Wynn, from the Milwaukee County Office of Equity. Wynn begins by explaining the county's role in the event.
In reference to Milwaukee County, we have been in support of Heal the Hood for a few years now. We are actually in partnership with DHHS, Department of Human Health Services, where we collaborate together as departments to actually be engaged in the community. And this year, what makes this year very unique is that we're bringing our Milwaukee County Village. This is where, as Milwaukee County, we are bringing our services to community. We aren't looking for community to come to us. We want to be on the grounds, and Heal the Hood is a great way to do that. Our goal is to make Milwaukee County the healthiest county in Wisconsin, and another way to do that is to be very intentional about how we're sponsoring, how we're collaborating, how we are building sustainable partnerships with each other. And so Heal the Hood has always been that partner that we can not only collaborate, not only partner, but also be thought partners. How do we increase Heal the Hood? What can the county do better? How can we work collaboratively across departments to really support not just community members, but this notion to increase civic trust to actually bridge community and government work?
I do want to hear more just about like how you see this relationship continuing to like blossom and where, each of your separate entities can benefit the other.
It's important that as government entities that we are being intentional about how we're collaborating with partners who are not only just demonstrating impact, but partners who have meaningful and intentional vision, right? There's this negative connotation that government hasn't been there for people, right? And so a way of increasing that trust with community is showing up where community is gathering, right? Now, we can't do it all. We're one department, right? But we can be very intentional about how we're doing it and inviting other departments and other entities across Milwaukee County to join us. So one of the amazing things that are happening this year is, again, we're inviting departments across Milwaukee County to come and give resources around housing, mental health, other resources throughout the county. And this strategy, we are actually going into the community. We will have a Milwaukee Village. We will have tables there. We have been intentional about departments signing up. We have been intentional about the resources and services. And so this is a good demonstration of what good government looks like and how we can have meaningful engagement with community leaders and grassroots initiatives.
Family spoke real important to just that bridge that needs to be built stronger between government and boots on the ground type of organizations and initiatives like Heal the Hood. And so for me, this partnership, it goes so much further than beyond, let's collect some data together, let's spread a couple of dollars around, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like this type of partnership is where I can call Ricardo or I can call these other individuals and say, hey, I need some help. Can you help me? We're trying to navigate this. We're trying to do this. What are your thoughts on this? What's your opinion? Can you aid and assist? And so that's personal relationship building. That goes so much deeper than, again, what's the name of the organization? We are regular citizens. I mean, we superheroes at heart, but we are regular citizens who just want to see better for our city. And so if that means we collaborate and shake hands together, then that's what we're doing. We break that bread.
Yep. Yeah. And I also want to add on to that. We're in a climate where we are expected to do more with less.
That's good.
Resources are drying up, right? There are so many stipulations now on how we even address racial and health disparities for our people and other populations. And this is a demonstration of what it means to go back to grassroots, what it means to really demonstrate what true partnership looks like. Because this is his thing. He didn't have to ask us to come, but that speaks to the partnership and authentic engagement, which we get to demonstrate what that looks like, right? It's centered with people, around people, for the people, and people work together like us to make it happen.
Speaking of current events, we're all talking about like how to address violence, how to address this need, that need. I guess, Ajamu, I'll direct this to you first. Do you find that now's the time that like Heal the Hood Block Party Resource Fair is like needed more than ever, or is it just confirming we need to continue to do this work?
This is what we do. We're going to do this work whether so-and-so is the president or so-and-so is the president. We're going to do this work whether we got the keyboards or whether we don't. We're going to serve the community to whatever capacity that looks like. And so I think for us, just being able to say we want to serve and us not defining what that need is that we come to serve, right? Us really asking community, what do y'all need from us, right? And so I would even say it's a now more than ever thing. Now, don't get me wrong. Times is real wicked right now. DV is on the rise and all of these other things, and it's not even hot outside yet. And so absolutely, like it is definitely necessary without a doubt. But I just believe that when you are called and chosen and assigned by God, you just gonna do that work.
And I would add, for my role at the county, now more than ever, it's important for people to really understand the impact that systems like Milwaukee County, specifically with DHHS and Office of Equity, that we actually have in community, right? Because we've been doing this work, we've been supporting, we've been showing up in spaces, right? And now in a time where people want to know, what are we doing? What are we doing? It's even more important for community to see us, to be more visible. A lot of times in the past, we support and we just lay low, right? But now more than ever, people need to see people who look like them, boots to the ground, doing things at different levels of leadership, supporting our people at at a community level, and being able to link them to services to get those resources, to focus on how do we approach community as a whole being, right? A whole center person approach, So us being in Heal the Hood, there's fun, there's food, there's healing. We're addressing mental health. We're addressing housing. We're addressing these disparities that people are often challenged with every day to live a better life.
I want to just add to that. I love the reframing of that question, or that answer rather, because again, it's not about now more than ever we need to do the work. It's now more than ever, let's bring this thing in. Let's continue to work, but let's figure out what the collaborative piece of the puzzle looks like.
I remember when we all lived in the same apartment complex, and I would see flyers around my apartment complex, and I would see these things, and it's like now it's a full circle moment that throughout these years I've been able to watch it grow, and now I get to actually invest in a different capacity, right? And so people think you need money, and money makes the world go around, but what sticks with you is being authentic and genuine about it, right? I hope that young kids remember Heal the Hood when they're older and they're thinking about how do I gather people and where did I learn to heal, and these things that they remember events like Heal the Hood and understand the importance of that.
My last feedback will be what Bro said, that last piece of that puzzle, talking about how the young babies is impacted. I'll say these two things and I'll be very quick with them. We was doing a block party on 24th and Burleigh in the ghettos one time. And long story short, this woman come up to me, and I got some pictures with these two kids and his sister. And she was pretty much saying, like, she was looking for the person who was running the organization. They pointed me in her direction. And she was just like, listen, one of the little girls, she had a scar across her face, literally right across the middle of her face. She had been hit by a straight bullet. And I got the pictures with this baby and everything. I think this was auntie or grandma, one of the two, but she was saying that her baby had got hit by a straight bullet. And she said they don't go out or do nothing no more. Like, she said this was their first time, really being in community since that. And the babies was having fun. They got their faces painted. They were safe. They felt comfortable. This is in the heart of the ghettos. You know what I'm saying? Where people are saying, those of us who have been afflicted by various levels of violence, we feel safe right now with Heal the Hood, right? So that's one thing when you talk about the element with the kids. But I'm excited that this year, a lot of the young kids who've grown up with Heal the Hood been going on for 14 years. So I got a lot of nieces and nephews and community nieces and nephews who've been around Heal the Hood for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And so this year is one of the first years we paying some of our nieces and nephews to help us with various things with Heal the Hood, be it helping in the children's corner, niece and them, let me give y'all 500. This is what I need y'all to do. I need y'all to do this activity. I need y'all to engage folks this way. Again, we want to be able to empower for real that next generation, and not just have them around Heal the Hood, but teach them up and train them up, because one day I'm gonna need them to take over Heal the Hood for real.
Ajamu Butler is the founder of Heal the Hood MKE. Ricardo Wynn is the Community Engagement Manager for Milwaukee County's Office of Equity. They both spoke with WUWM's race and ethnicity reporter Taryn Powell. The Heal the Hood Block Party and Resource Fair is happening this Saturday on Atkinson Avenue between 9th and 11th. If you need some flexibility for when you listen, you can listen to Lake Effect on demand. Find it as a podcast wherever you like to listen, to download and enjoy on the go. Still to come, we'll learn how the historic Artemis II mission around the moon paved the way for future space travel. That's next on Lake Effect, on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. At the beginning of April, the world watched as astronauts traveled around the moon inside the Orion spacecraft on the Artemis II mission. It was the first crewed mission on NASA's path to establishing a long-term presence on the moon for science and exploration. The mission gave us brand new images of the moon and tested key equipment and procedures for future missions. It's an exciting moment in history for both the public and for scientists. Astronomy contributor Gene Creighton joins Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski to share takeaways from the mission.
So today we're going to talk about Artemis II and the main takeaways. And this was such a great, interesting, beautiful, exciting moment in our collective history. And Artemis II, for people who need a little reminder, it was a 10-day mission. It was NASA's biggest test in decades, and 4 astronauts completed a record-breaking flyby of the moon. Now, technically, this was a test flight. There was some confusion that, people are going to the moon. It's like, no, we flew around it. So can you share some of the main things that Artemis II was testing out?
Sure. So first of all, just a reminder that we haven't actually sent a crewed mission to the moon for more than 50 years. So that's 2 generations of engineers who've come and gone, have retired. So a lot of the know-how needed to be reinvented. And we have now computers that are significantly better than what could be relied upon in the 60s. So we have different, actually, ways of solving problems than we did then. So we want to make sure that the brand new rocket, what's called the SLS, the Space Launch System, has the power to get us all the way to the moon and back. And the spacecraft itself had sufficient human preservation systems to keep people happy and comfortable. There are things you have to worry about, like carbon dioxide levels. There are all kinds of things that have to work. And in fact, people don't realize that, yes, the astronauts spend time doing research, but a lot of their time is spent just to keep those systems working.
Interesting. Yeah. And speaking of the spacecraft, it was called Orion. It was roomier than the last manned spacecraft. It's about a camper van size capsule. And it plays a crucial part of this mission. But what I found interesting, and it's also a necessity, right? But that this spacecraft was new and it was tested in real time. So how do you think it did overall?
Well, the thing that was critical was the heat shield. And many of our listeners probably were aware of this, at least vaguely. But any object coming into the atmosphere usually is moving something like 25,000 miles an hour. When it hits that atmosphere, that's extreme heat because of friction. And you need a shield to make sure that the inside of the spacecraft doesn't get too hot. And in the series of missions, Artemis I being the first one, no people on board, the heat shield didn't perform as well as was hoped. So they made some adjustments, and it worked fine. So as far as I'm concerned, that was the major issue and the major fear if it didn't work, because that was not tested. That was like we made some changes and, informed changes, but there was some concern about whether, the proof is in the pudding always.
Yes. And watching the landing was a very nerve-wracking moment. Unfortunately, everything worked out, especially with the crewed mission. There are some things that can't be tested until you're actually in space.
That's right. And again, to put this in perspective, we had Artemis I, Artemis II. Now, until recently, we thought that we were going to land people with Artemis III in 2028.
Yes.
However, there's some now change that the next mission, Artemis III, is going to be a connection. So a spacecraft is going to come in orbit of the moon in order to refuel and then come back. And that's going to allow for the final actual landing with Artemis IV.
With humans back on the moon.
Humans on the moon, yes. And you can see how cautiously this progresses because each of these steps requires a sort of a leap of technology, a leap of understanding, and you want to make sure that you proceed with caution because if something goes terribly wrong, then I assume that there are people at NASA who worry this whole thing might just be shut down.
Right. And do you feel like this mission in particular revived NASA for the public eye?
Yes.
I mean, I personally think so because we've been inundated with private space companies, right, over the past few years.
Yes.
And disinvestment in the government and disinvestment in NASA. So how do you feel it hopefully rejuvenated the
I think it
public
rejuvenated,
image?
and I think a whole nother generation of people, maybe two, thought, whoa, okay, this is happening on my watch. Because for them, this is the stuff of lore, the stuff of almost science fiction. So it's nice to make it real again. So it was great to see a group of people who obviously liked each other.
Yes.
And a woman as part of the team, the first person of color to go around the moon, and a Canadian, so not just one nation. It just felt like the right message for the moment.
Absolutely. It was really special and endearing to see the way that people globally responded to this crew and this space flight. How did it feel for you? I'm sure you're excited about the science, yes, on one part being collected, but also, working in spaces with that kind of camaraderie around this field of study. What were you thinking and feeling as this progressed?
So I have worked for NASA before on an infrared satellite, and I know the excitement of a successful launch. I know the excitement of, oh, geez, we have this problem here now, and what are we going to do to fix it? Long hours, of course. People on the ground obviously don't say, oh, well, I clocked in now at 5 and I'm going home. You're doing what you can to help. So it's very sweet. It's sweet to see the success, to build that confidence again. I mean, I have the confidence, but to see the general public has the confidence that these big projects are much more likely to happen with collaborations among large nations rather than, I'll say it, a megalomaniac who has a bunch of money and says, well, maybe I will and maybe I won't. So it's nice to restore our confidence in NASA.
Well, and kind of on that note, I wanted to ask your personal opinion about this. Like, this is our modern day space race, like going back to the moon, right? But for scientists who do collaborate with other scientists around the world, what do you think of the term space race? I feel there's not ownership over the moon, right? Like whether America's the first to go back there or not, because I know China's also working on putting people on the moon as well.
Yeah. I think it's an unfortunate term, but I think some people feel it might be strategic because the kind of budgets you have access to if you claim that this is a national security issue are significantly orders of magnitude larger than if you say this is really interesting science. Now, there is an asterisk here. People are talking about an economy on the moon. And I am not quite sure exactly how likely that is. But people are definitely building companies. They're real things where they figure out how can we make roads on the moon? How can we use material that's there? So I'm still waiting because I think that some things will need to be secured, like clients will need to be secured, and I don't know if there'll be enough interest. But it's fascinating to imagine that within the next, 20 years, there could be, a base on the moon that enables us to send people to Mars, or that there could be an economy on the moon. It's just hard to really.
Yeah, it's like the stuff of science fiction and how close are we? Yeah, we get into that.
Yeah, but I love anything that makes people look up and consider, what are we learning about the moon? How are we engaging and understanding our universe better? To me, of course, is always a plus.
Yes. And speaking of the moon, this Artemis II mission, shows that the moon still holds some mysteries. Did you have any favorite moments or new images of the moon or from the moon that stood out to you?
I guess the real answer is I love the human moment that the 3 astronauts decided that they wanted to name a particular crater after the commander, Reed Wiseman's late wife. I thought, what a nice, warm, meaningful gesture. And I think that kind of capacity that people have of problem solving, but also of compassion, is what makes us special.
Absolutely. And I think this was, I mean, I know a ton of work goes into selecting crews, but this was a truly special group of 4 people that were up there.
You know, there's a lot of science going around, like deciding who would make a good team member. We know a lot more about that. I like to think about the Apollo missions. All they really wanted were people who were good test pilots. That's really, and if they're people that you would want to have a coffee with, that was less important. But now they understand that the team has to gel, the team has to work together, and they really are looking for people who listen, who can build consensus. It's really quite different.
And beautiful, and more to come. But for today, Jean, thank you so much for joining me today to share your reflections on Artemis II.
Always a pleasure, Audrey. Thank you.
Jean Creighton is the director of the Manfred Olson Planetarium at UW-Milwaukee and our regular astronomy contributor. She spoke with Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski. You can explore their past conversations at WUWM.com. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll bring you a new Chirp Chat all about bank swallows. We'll tell you about their unique behaviors that you can see along the bluffs of Lake Michigan. That's tomorrow at noon on Lake Effect. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.